welcome, and thank you for spending the time, taking the time to get with me to have this flow session because it's really important. I get really excited, and it's new for me. It's not something that is in my comfort zone, but like I've told you a little while ago, and everyone else that I spoke to with this year, this is the year of the upskill, and I'm stepping out onto a branch here of interviewing instead of being the interviewer, which is a whole new dynamic for me. But I think we're going to have a great session because we do have a good vibe, we do have a good flow. And I know that in the future, I won't be just interviewing anyone that wants to come on the show or just anybody. But I know that you and I will talk a lot more in the future because what you bring to the table is so good for a lot of different reasons. I do a lot of thought processes, how to think, how to find better ways to think, change habits, break the patterns of the old ways. And you dive deep into ancient philosophy, ancient psychology, ancient everything. And that is so intriguing. It ties into what I like to promote and what I like to talk about. There are so many similarities, and every time I even think about reaching out to you, I already know that I already have 10 questions to ask before you even respond. So this is definitely going to be fun. But so today's unique. We already know that, but what we really want to get into, or what we want to talk about today, is some of the ancient philosophies, ancient ways of thinking from way back in time, 2000 years ago, even before that, how humanity had its way, had its struggles, whether it was just for survival or running from dinosaurs or whatnot, compared to the modern world. And, in today's modern world, instead of running from a dinosaur, it's we're running from our boss, or we're running from what happens if I'm not able to, make the deal or pay the rent, right? So it's a little bit different because of technology, and we've evolved so much as a human species, but internally, all the mechanics are still the same way. And I know you have some good stuff to say about that. So about that, what are some similarities you think between the ancient mind and today's modern mind? Tell
Well,
us a little bit about that.
brilliantly said, and that's exactly um, my focus is that we're essentially living. We have an ancient mind that is in the modern world, and I think that's what I realized as I was growing up, getting into this stuff. When I was young, I got really into ancient history. My mom used to buy me a lot of books on Egypt and Rome, and that's how a lot of my fascination with this stuff started. And even as a young child, I remember thinking more empathetically about what was going on in the people's lives that were living at this time. It wasn't so much about the buildings, what they were wearing. It was the fact that this was so long ago, which created such a mystery and such a fascinating intrigue to a small child who just got born on the planet. Like, wow, all of this happened so long ago, before I existed. What was it like for them? What type of experience did they have? Did they think the same way I do? Do they feel the same way I do? And you summed it up really well there at the beginning by saying that, whether we were running from, some creature in the ice age, or if we were being chased by, these things that are happening to us,
Velociraptor.
right? Yeah, instead of a velociraptor, or a woolly mammoth, or some kind of, a saber-toothed tiger, we're running from our modern problems, but our bodies and our minds and everything that we have been for tens of thousands of years, is still operating the same way. It still sees it as the same type of threat, and it still responds and reacts the same way. So that kind of perennial message that you're pulling through your work, which is that we all share these same experiences, and we all have these same problems, and we like to think of ourselves as unique and individual, and to a large degree we are, but we share so many common foundational experiences, emotional experiences, and psychological experiences. And this is this has been going on for thousands and thousands of years.
Wow, thank you for sharing. That was a lot of good stuff that you shared. And again, every time you bring something up, it leads me to like a tree branch of questions. Like I don't know which way to go, but I'm going to start here because you bring up something really interesting that I never really thought about. Um, but there's a time in evolution where we changed on a logical level, right? Where we went through this, caveman kind of thinking, and then we started thinking rationally, logically, and then we started thinking creatively. And this happened over thousands of years, and we've evolved to the human species we are now, which is so much different than it was when we first started. But what's really intriguing about this conversation is the fact that even back then, right? Let's just say during the Roman times, there were um, society itself, or what people had to experience are kind of similar to things now, right? They had to deal with empirical hierarchy, social, social, what social statuses. Where do you stand on the food chain, right? Having to deal with being able to provide for your family. What happens if you get thrown out of the city, right? You get banished from the city, or if you do something wrong, how did that at the time, at ancient times, when you did something wrong like a criminal act, how was their law, like their civic, how they handled civility and did dealt with law? They still had to go through all that, and even though all those things were different, they didn't have the technology we did internally. All of the biomechanics that human beings are created with were the same. Like we still had the way our brains perceive a modern threat were the same, and our stress hormones worked exactly the same as they did when back then as they do now. So internally, we dealt with so much. We dealt with things extremely similar that we have to deal with today, where you would think they're not that. What I think what would separate us the most is the technology,
Right.
right? We have cars now instead of chariots and
Right.
horses.
That's right.
We have scooters instead of ponies. Those types of things. We have phones. Like technology back then would have been like magical to them. Um, but the way, no matter how much is changed throughout evolution, the bio the biomechanics internally inside human beings hasn't changed.
Not
And
at all.
it's
Not at all.
amazing that the philosophers and even the scientists back then figured it out. We're still talking about the same things that
Right.
Marcus Aurelius talked about, and
Yes.
Socrates and all these people from thousands of years ago. They still are relevant today. And that's why this conversation is so fascinating. It's because as much as things change, things still stay the same.
That's right. And
Um,
you also this idea of what truth is and what morality is, what right and wrong is. Like those are unchangeable things, right? Those are things that are the same now as they always have been since the very beginning. So you mentioned Marcus Aurelius. I mean, if you were to just read Marcus Aurelius's meditations, you're going to find an incredibly modern mind in a very ancient text. He was in his mid 20s, early 30s, writing to himself, and the mind that it took to even produce that type of information. So simple, Stoic philosophy, very similar to what you're doing, which is breaking things down, very complex ideas of what it is to be a true and a just human, all really, really simply said. And it showed me when I read that book that God, there's really nothing that has changed in 2,000 years. And Rome was very modern, especially compared to the rest of the world at the time. But you had lawyers, you had bankers, you had, all the same tradesmen and craftsmen that we have
Society.
today. We had a full modern
Yeah.
society, essentially. In fact, Rome almost was, it actually had discovered steam power. And the only reason that steam power wasn't produced for energy for transportation is they had such a massive slave empire that it was just not necessary because they had so many slaves. But You could have had a locomotive created in the ancient Roman Empire had there been enough need for it. So you did have a pretty modern society, and that's 2,000 years ago. When you go back to even further than that, ancient Egypt, and you look at some of the scripts there, like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and a lot of this stuff is kind of psychology, mythology, and it's like a science of the soul. These things are so complex and so advanced. What they were doing with mathematics and tracking the star systems and all of these things they did, their minds were just as scientific and just as advanced as any of the people at MIT today or any of the people that we would consider the top scientists in the world. So a lot of the same ways of thinking, why are we here? How does this work? And understanding fundamental mechanics of the laws of physics and understanding all of the different things that we consider modern today. That was going on thousands and thousands of years ago. And so we tend to really view ourselves as an advanced culture, and we only really can see that through technology because in the mental sphere, we're still warring with each other. We're still fighting with each other like we have for thousands of years. There's really been no advancement in terms of society treating itself that much better. I mean, just 50, 70 years ago, we had a giant set of wars, world wars that killed millions and millions of people. We're always at each other's throats. There's still so many barbaric societies out there and barbaric things happening under the current of society. So we really haven't advanced that much in terms of spiritual advancement um, or psychological advancement. It's really just the technology. And I think that's interesting about the technology is I think we're kind of at a tipping point where the information age has provided us a lot of access and opportunity. At the same time, it's been used to keep us distracted and keep us entertained. What percentage of the internet is used for education compared to entertainment and distraction and you know malignant behaviors? I think it's doing us a little bit more harm than it is good at this point. And I think that ties into some of your work. Like, how can we break free from that? How can we get back to um, where we were when we had less distraction? The benefit of the ancient um, mind, the benefit of the ancient experience is it was so busy getting things done fundamentally, like food, shelter, survival, um, you know, raising children, all of the things that it took to just live. We didn't have time to be upset about something that we read on the internet. We didn't have time to really have all of these issues, right? Like, um, there's a lot of sayings about how idle time, right, is really how evil gets in, is because when we have not enough um, danger in front of us that we can recognize, we start to manifest that in our own mind. And I think that's what's happening. I think that we're creating, the saber-toothed tiger that's not there, that we don't have to fight anymore because our body is designed to fight. Our body is designed, our mind is designed to overcome, right? And so if there's nothing going on, we just create things. And I think that's why your work is so important because it's helping people go, hey, stop, pause, relax, focus, detach, center,
Unplug.
unplug. And I think that's the key. I think we're realizing that it's better for us to detech ourselves now. And we're starting to realize that unplugging is healthy for us. And that ties into the experience that we've always had, that ancient mind, that ancient experience, the experience of just waking up, focusing on who you are. You're not looking at a TV. You're not looking at a phone. You're not scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or a social media site looking what other people are saying and what's going on in the world. You're focused on making breakfast. You're focused on feeding your children. You're focused on making your coffee in the morning. And there's a peace in that. There's a sense of serenity that we all need to remember comes with just day-to-day experience. And I think that's the key to some of the stuff that you're doing, which I find really, really beneficial. Um, so yeah, rant over, huh?
No, so all of that is well said, very well articulated, and I couldn't agree more with so many of those things that you're saying because it reminds me of while you were talking, I started thinking about something. Um, so as a human species, we are in different sections of the world, in our own little, you know, segments, right? Different countries, different continents or whatnot, different beliefs in different areas of the world or whatnot. But in the West here, in the West world, we are very we're capitalists, right? Very capitalistic, um, and I think that spirituality has been separated a little bit more recently than it has in the past, right? When you bring spirituality and mix that to today's environment where everything is, since COVID, has people on alert, right? Everybody's fight or flight system is jacked on, like cranked up to on high, whether you're at work, whether you're at traffic, whether you're at home, even if you work from home. And what's being talked about a lot now is mental decompression, mental, you know, what am I trying to say here? Mindfulness, meditation, mental, taking care of your mindset, um, internalizing things, looking for peace of mind, and separating yourself from all of that, like strengthening your mental muscles more, which is here isn't as popular as it's been in the East, where mindfulness comes from, right? To them, it's just another day in life. For us, we have to learn how to adopt those skills, and we're not used to it, so it's a little bit difficult for people that are, well, check this out. I even thought of this right now. Mindfulness and mental fitness is really high on in the country. Like everybody, it's starting to trend to where people thought it was woohoo. Nobody cared about it back in the past, but now it's trending. And now, guess what's happening in a capitalist country? It's being commercialized. It's being sold in packages. It's being all of these things that it's getting away from. Um, it's being more turned more into a product to sell and make profit off, instead of finding the people who can really articulate how you can find center and have an experience to change yourself. It's not, they're trying to sell it like it's a pill or medication when it's not. It's a set of behaviors and practices that you have to adopt and practice over and over and master. I'm ranting now. You see where I'm going with this?
Well,
See me
and
ranting?
but that's the thing about it, is that you have ancient sayings that this is why when I used to read that stuff you're talking about, the commercialization, all self-help essentially is, if you have read the ancients, it's just it's a commercialization and a repackaging of the same truths that have been spoken for thousands of years. And I used to, in my last relationship, I used to say, instead of reading that, why don't you check out Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, or why don't you go and look at some of this ancient Vedic scripture stuff that I'm into, because
Where it all originated from.
it's where it
Go
originates.
straight to
Well,
the source.
you go to the source, and then you realize, like, my God, these guys are saying it so beautifully, and it's not even the source, right? Because they themselves say that this comes from a more ancient time, and what they're saying is that we're in cycles, like we're not in a linear system, and that's part of the problem, is that Western culture and this modern world is not seeing the big picture, the full circle, the circle of life, the circle of the universe, the circle of all of these things that come back, right? Like, I have a saying in my show that I say that the further you go back in the past, you end up in the future. And what that means is that when you go back into ancient times, you eventually find societies that are more advanced than we are today. Some of them are more spiritually advanced, less technologically advanced, and then some are uh, in a very high probability even more advanced. We hear about these civilizations like Atlantis. The Vedic scriptures talk about these cycles. In all major mythologies, there's these cycles, these cosmic cycles where we go through, these different ages of man, and we return to these higher civilizations and higher societies. That's why I think that this ties so well into your work, because what you're doing is you're um, you're simplifying things in a way that even an ancient person can understand. Like even somebody who 2,000 years ago who wasn't some scholar on the street, you would be able to, if you lived, in ancient Egypt or in ancient Rome, you personally could have a business of just helping people not worry about things, not stress about things, whether it be a relationship issue, a job issue, what's going on with their life. It's still applicable to this ancient person, which means it's perennial wisdom, and anything that survives time, right? Like we always hear these sayings, crooked as a politician. That's been going on for thousands of years, right? Which is why I laugh. It's like, why are you trusting politicians? Like for thousands of years, we've had a saying that, you're as crooked as a politician. It's like the ancients are literally telling you that this shit never changes, and so
That's
it's
funny.
just funny to me because all of the answers are in the past, and we're all blindly just hitting walls. Like, what's going on here? And it's like just read what we went through, read what happened. Look at what happened to all governments. Look what all happened to all civilizations. Like, look what they went through. There's these patterns. There's these cycles. Recognize the cycles, and then you can prevent, you know, um, doing them again and repeating the same problems. So I feel like that if we go back in time and we look at the ancient mind, we can start to unpack why we're having such stress and anxiety in the modern world.